Wokeness. A word I'm sure you've heard before, and are perhaps tired of hearing. It's become a very ubiquitous term, and I'd wager that everyone is, to a certain degree, aware of what it means, although many struggle to define it concretely. While there have been numerous attempts over the years to define it, usually ascribing it to a certain ideology or philosophical tradition, these attempts widely conflict with one another. Some define woke as a form of socialism or Marxism, where class is substituted with race, gender, or sexuality. Others consider it a continuation of liberalism, of a radical push towards equality and basic liberties for all individuals. The only commonality in all definitions is that woke belongs to the political left. The disagreement about the definition and ideological origin of wokeness stems from the fact that wokeness is not really a well-defined political term. Rather, it's a blanket term for many attitudes, movements, and beliefs which all emerged relatively recently, rightly seen by some as an extreme form of political correctness. Therefore, wokeness is not to be understood as a discrete set of ideas, but rather a sentiment held in the socio-political realm, informing judgments on morality and policy. The majority of controversial issues, particularly social issues where wokeness has major stakes, are moral disagreements. While the origins of wokeness are multifaceted and not traceable to any singular intellectual tradition, it creates a shift in moral opinion that has slowly crept into the broader Western culture, hence why so many are feeling alienated by its emergence. To understand this shift in morality, I'll be utilizing moral foundations theory developed by Jonathan Haidt and laid out in his book, The Righteous Mind. However, it should be kept in mind that, like any psychological model, moral foundations theory isn't perfect by any means, and is thus only useful insofar as it has explanatory power. With that having been said, however, it still suffices for our purposes. Haidt identified 6 axes, or foundations, that determine one's moral inclinations. If we understand these, we can identify the origin of the woke mentality. The first axis is care versus harm, encompassing our feelings of concern and compassion and driving our disdain for those who harm the weak and vulnerable. The second axis is fairness and cheating, which includes the golden rule, treating others as you want to be treated. The third is freedom versus oppression, not just from the state, but from any authority, including one's own parents. Fourth, loyalty versus betrayal, or in other words, one's desire to belong to a collective, be it the nation or even your own sports team. Fifth, authority or subversion, which can be understood as respect for authority. The sixth and final axis is sanctity versus degradation, and includes reverence held for what we perceive as sacred, or otherwise self-justifying. Using these foundations, Haidt formulated a questionnaire that plotted people's scores on each foundation, and then categorized these scores based on their stated political opinions. The results showed a clear difference in the moral beliefs of progressives and conservatives. Conservatives, on average, scored equally across all foundations. Progressives, on the other hand, scored very high on care, liberty, and fairness, but scored very low on other values. This makes sense, as progressives have always valued justice, equality, and freedom. They want to minimize suffering, maximize opportunities, and treat everyone equally. Authority, group loyalty, and sanctity have no place in the progressive worldview, as they prioritize the individual above all else, and see no intrinsic value in the sacred. For the progressive, the morality of authority, loyalty, and sanctity is merely the foundations for authoritarianism, xenophobia, and puritanism. Using this model, we can finally understand the woke mindset and identify its core values. A strong desire for the maximum possible expression of an individual's identity with the absolute equality between all individuals, coupled with an extreme apathy for traditional forms and a pronounced disdain for anything which inhibits self-expression. This explains why wokeism always seeks to accentuate and essentialize people's natural qualities, such as sexuality, race, or disabilities, to a degree unprecedented in human history. In this way, wokeism can be described as a form of extreme progressivism and a continuation of those ideas. It's rather unsurprising that wokeism is similar to progressivism, as the former had emerged from the latter. But what is interesting is how unique wokeness is to the West. Jonathan Haidt referred to this phenomenon as weird. Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. And this is particularly evident when one considers that wokeness is most prevalent in rich urban areas, especially in universities. It follows, then, that wokeism is not necessarily a shift in Western morality, rather in many ways a more extreme continuation of it, proliferating in rich and educated urban areas. This is even more interesting, since those who oppose wokeism typically see it as a mind virus, corrupting the West and its values. However, as we've shown, this does not seem to be the case. It is therefore up to the critics of wokeism to find a new path for Western civilization, rather than whining about a supposed corruption.